My name is Samantha Totten. I live in East Hampton. I'm 20 years old, and I have spent my entire life at this library. I was the Teen Advisory Board President for 3 years, and I also worked here as a page for 3 years.
My name is Wells Wolcott. I live in East Hampton town, like Northwest Woods area, and I've had a close relationship with the library my whole life. I've maintained close relationships with the librarians and a lot of the staff. They feel more like friends than staff at this point. But yeah, the library has been a huge part of my childhood and my relationship to this hometown.
My name is Sophia. I am from the Northwest Woods, and I think my connection from the library goes back, I'd say at least since I was 3 years old when I started going here, going to all the events. So the library's definitely been very close to me, close to my heart.
Looking back at January 2020, my life was so exciting. I was a senior in high school, and I just submit the last of my college applications.
I remember I was still preparing for senior prom, bought a dress in February for $30, and I thought, oh, this is such a great deal. I'm getting this 2 months early for $30.
We were very aware that our high school years were wrapping up and we were getting a bit sentimental, but really just felt like we were making the most of it. I was doing all my favorite things. I was taking a little bit easier on my studies because, typical senioritis had hit, and that's when, in your last couple months at high school, the grades aren't as important anymore, and you start focusing on more of your friendships and more of the things that make that period of your life fun. And so really I was just excited about the future, but also very excited to be in the present.
So it was mesh with black sequins. I remember the one time I tried it on, it kind of reminded me of Cher's outfit to the Oscars, but like a much more toned down version of that. But yeah, I never did that because I never really wore the dress.
I remember there was a little bit of anxiety, but still it was like, it's all a big nothing burger. It was really how it felt until right when it happened, that sort of weekend of March 13th. I remember my brother sort of fell ill and we were like, is it COVID, is it not? Looking back, it probably was. I think there was a lot of people, a lot more than we thought had it at the time, and that was, around March 10th, and so I took that Thursday, Friday off of school just in case and never went back.
We had an upstairs neighbor who was doing a residency, and my mom has asthma, so I remember he said to her, just quarantine, don't go out. There was a board meeting that was basically, the heads of the district deciding, are we going to do stuff remote? And at the time it was just for a week, but I remember they voted no. They said that they weren't going to shut down and everything was still going to be there, but at the same time I knew that this would probably kill my mom if she got it. So I just made that personal decision where I was like, okay, I guess I just not going to go to school for a little while. The next day, it was a Friday, there was school, but I didn't go in. And then that was when they announced 1 week off. And then that 1 week turned into a year.
I couldn't imagine a world where we're all home, because I feel like in American culture, working is so important. And especially with this library, this was probably beginning of March. I was like, we would never shut down. We're a library, we're a government institution. There's absolutely no way. And I think the next week we got the email saying we're not coming back for at least a few months. I actually had a really interesting job during the pandemic. I got a spreadsheet of phone numbers of our senior citizens in the community, and I was every week I would call about 50 residents and to make sure that they had everything that they needed. So I would call them with a Google Voice number and say hi, how are you doing? Are you holding up okay? Do you need anything from the library? We can help you and get you in contact with food delivery, book delivery, anything that you would like. So that was my job during the pandemic. And so it was really nice to kind of get into contact with people that I would have never really had a conversation with. It was so nice to just check in on someone who really needed it during such an isolating time.
That weekend of March 13th that everyone talks about as the beginning of the pandemic, my family also moved houses. Probably wouldn't have been able to happen if it had been scheduled for a week later. So I found myself in a new house. I was a mattress on the floor because we hadn't gotten all of our furniture in. I was a very social person in high school, still am, and so to not be seeing my friends in person every day was a very big change. I mean, my life changed in every way imaginable. It was totally different, just from second week of March to the 3rd. It was totally unprecedented.
I had a really good relationship with my friends. My best friend Wells, he me and him were like inseparable, like, and so it was really hard to not see him once the pandemic was like really heavy.
On a given day, I'd probably talk to 20, 30 people, maybe more, and then suddenly that was limited to a group of maybe 10 friends that I was messaging on a daily basis, and my family who I was seeing every day. And then, you know, when things started loosening up a little bit more, I had socially distanced hangouts with maybe 2 or 3 close friends, right? There was only a few people who I actually saw and spoke to consistently, which was a total paradigm shift from what I was used to my life looking like.
And so once Zoom got really popular, we would all go and send the link to all of our friends for a Zoom room, and we would play games on our computers and stuff. And we eventually did start to see each other once it kind of slowed down. And our favorite thing to do is we would drive to Bridgehampton and go to like Panera Bread and we'd come back here actually to the library, even though it was still closed, and we would sit on the lawn and have a little picnic. We would try to make big events out of our small days.
I was someone who I think got a lot of positive energy from just those casual acquaintances in the day, you know, conversations with teachers, conversations with people who I don't know super well but would wave to in passing in the hallway. And definitely I felt something was missing from my life, not having those things around.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel disappointed that it feels like all of this, you know, transition period is kind of canceled. And, you know, I feel like for other people, you know, the schools have tried to make up for it, you know, inviting 2020 alumni back for a later ceremony, or like, but just none of that really happened. It was just a case of like, goodbye. You know, at one point they said like, oh, come back in to grab your stuff that was in your locker, like, you know, and then like, you know, grab the diploma with a little step and repeat. Like I remember it was a tote bag with a diploma, pair of sunglasses. For what reason, I do not know.
I remember in the short term after it began, probably late March, I remember having a moment with my mom where I expressed, I think it was after I just read a headline or something that it was going to be like a year or something until the vaccine, which ended up being like a pretty accurate timeline. I think I got mine in April of next year, but the idea of being on lockdown for a year, right, which, you know, ended up not being exactly what happened. Obviously there was precautions for a year, but it wasn't that total lockdown. But the idea of being in a total lockdown for a year, I just couldn't comprehend, and I thought I wouldn't be able to take. And I remember like getting really upset and talking to my mom and telling her that, like, you know, if we're stuck like this for a year, there's no way I'm gonna come out of it okay. Like I just felt like the only path forward was that I was gonna just decompose basically, you know. And obviously that's not what happened. I think I came out of it pretty okay, and obviously it wasn't a year of just total solitude in the home. But I remember that being a pretty scary moment, was when I was questioning what it would actually be like to be stuck in the home for an entire year. My sister has had issues, I think, she's a bit younger than me, and so being secluded from peers at like such a formative age, I think, just made it difficult to like have that comfort level with being in public and speaking publicly and, you know, participating in a school setting. And so I think I've seen in her and other peers her age, you know, an anxiety about things that I just considered par for the course when it came to schooling, you know, being in a classroom and raising your hand and answering questions.
When you're a first semester college student, there's so many different things you encounter. To go into it in already such an unprecedented time was really difficult. My parents also moved out of state, and so I was completely like living at home by myself with like no one else there. It got easier as time went on.
Breast cancer runs on both sides of my family, so my mom used to be very kind of like religious about the mammograms, but because of the pandemic and having to miss, you know, this medical procedure that she's very, very religious about, you know, of course it was the next time that she was able to go that they said there's something wrong. But she's okay, she's in remission right now. She's doing a lot better. You know, and I think that's also the benefit of being very on top of medical procedures, is probably if she had missed another one after, you know, already missing for the pandemic, then I'm sure it would have been a lot worse.
Certainly, I think early in the pandemic, I was very focused on learning to be with myself and get comfortable being alone and schedule things for myself.
I remember like the first week of online learning, I kind of had like a small breakdown because I didn't know how to do stuff in a very like unstructured manner. Having to self-impose that structure, I know, is going to be important for me. I did a lot of painting during the pandemic. I started working through a book that was called 1001 Movies to Watch Before You Die. I said that I wanted to kind of get started on that. And I mean, it's been like almost 3 years and I'm still working on it, but that means I got a lot more movies I gotta go watch.
Acceptance. If I had to sum up the pandemic in one word, I would say acceptance, and then elaborate on that. I think the pandemic, the word acceptance is emblematic of that, because I think I went into it with really strong ideas and, sort of naivete that obviously I still have to some extent. I'm still maturing in a million different ways, but in high school I had very strong ideas about myself and very strong ideas about, what the world would be and what I was going to do, and the pandemic obviously changed all of that. And, then I sort of applied those same ideas I had about the world to the pandemic, and I thought that I would be able to get myself through it and do it perfectly and, survive the pandemic like nobody else. And that was just not the case. It was really difficult, and it didn't look like what I wanted it to look like. And I fell short of my goals for how I wanted to live my life during it in a lot of ways. And I think it's been a long lesson to learn, but I think learning to react to things with acceptance instead of, fighting the way things are has been what the pandemic has taught me, and what I think it's taught a lot of people.
I guess I would have to say confusing. At first, people were saying it's not going to be so bad, and all of my teachers were like, we're not going to close down, and if we do, it'd only be for this long. And then we just kept getting pushed back, and it was really like, I'll never forget, like, I was sitting in my friend's driveway in my car, like talking and like eating lunch, and then that's when we like got the news update that Governor Cuomo was closing down the schools for the rest of the year, and that's when I was like, okay, it's like this is real. Like I think it's beginning of May, so I was like really holding on to at least having like 1 week in school left. It was hard because I didn't know when we would return to normalcy, and so every day it was just the same thing over and over. Because of the pandemic, I did not commit to my college on time as when I should have. I commit to college after I graduated high school because I had no idea where we were going to be, and I did not want to pay out of state to not be in class. I was not looking forward to paying, I don't know, $50,000 a year to sit in my dorm room and just go on Zoom classes. So I held out as long as I could. So I think I commit to college like July 1st or something. And I think that was one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I do love my small school, and I was the only one of my friends that got to go to school in person because we were such a small school. I got to have in-person classes my first semester. But confusing is definitely the word I would use to describe it.
I mean, I know this is probably a sad way to look at it, but I'd say devastating for everybody, and in every sense of the word, in terms of medical, and not just for people who got sick with the virus, people like my mom who had to miss going to mammograms, people who got sick for non-COVID reasons, and all of that had to be kind of pushed aside because of the fact that this was devastating, the lives lost, and I think the people who aren't going to be the same, the economic stuff, and I mean, we're still feeling it right now,